right, Matt Johnson from Omnia Fishing here, and I'm joined by my friend Mike from Bass Forecast, who is down in the Texas area. And we've been doing a bunch of these recent Omnia Fishing reports. We're recording this one on May 22nd. And one of the great things about Mike is he's down in the Texas area, so he can give us a little bit of a report on some local areas to the Dallas area and some of the greater Dallas lakes, some of the ones that have been hot and in the news recently, and also give us a little bit about active and peak feeding times. More to come on that with his introduction on Bass Forecast. So, Mike, can you do a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Hello, thanks, Matt, for inviting me. Yes, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bass Forecast. We developed the product 7 years ago and been building on it ever since. It's to help anglers simplify bass science and understand how real-time weather is going to affect their experience in the upcoming 10 days.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I think everybody in the market sees us as direct competitors, but you and I have spent so much time talking about how the fact that our products are very complementary to each other. And, Omnia really is focused on map and innovation, connecting you with the right tackle, and even operationally shipping that product to you really quickly. On the Bass Forecast side, really the science behind patterns and what affects fish behavior and when to determine peak fishing times and peak active behavior. So this is going to be a great opportunity to talk about Texas generally, what's happening and what's going on the week of May 19th. And what I've done right away is pulled up some of the water temperature data. I thought that's a good place to start. And so I have Lake Fork in my purview. That's one that you're pretty familiar with. And I want to start there. So I opened up the water temperature layer. All of this is pulled from satellite. Looks like the satellite last passed over Texas May 13th. And it looks like it's giving us readings of mid 70s in some of these little bays. So what were you seeing last time you were out on Fork?
I was out there a month and a half ago, but so it was substantially cooler, but it was mid 60s. But a friend of mine fished a lake just south of Fork last weekend. He was seeing 78. It's been a little warmer the past few days, so I wouldn't be surprised if, Matt, these numbers are now up about anywhere from 2 to 6 degrees, depending on the area of the lake.
Yeah, that's the interesting piece of this, because we can pull some of this historical data and actually take a look at what has changed over time. And we have seen these warm up fairly quickly. But like you said, this data is just about 8 days old now on that last satellite pass. So it's possible they're a little bit higher there. As far as patterns go, what are we seeing in the Lake Fork area? I can pull up some of these fishing reports that have been filed. Everything that we're seeing right now is that the bass have started to move in a general summer pattern. We're seeing a lot of Carolina rigs, a lot of wacky rigs moving into some of those finesse techniques. What are you hearing? What's the local report on what's going on Lake Fork right now?
Like you said, it depends on, whether or not the weather pattern will have the fish roaming and highly active or inactive. So if they're highly roaming and active this time of year, I think what we're going to see is swim baits, spinner baits, moving baits, right? Crank baits, and fishing, transition zones out of the post spawn to summer feeding areas like secondary points, main lake points. Matt, if we did have a little bit of a cold front, not major, but enough to push the fish just a little deeper, in which case you probably want to drop down and do drop shots. And, even suspending jerk baits are very popular this time of year. And at Lake Fork, it's gizzard shad, threadfin shad, or brim. As a southern lake, most southern bass lakes are that kind of pattern.
Yeah, perfect.
But, to your point about water temp too, what our algorithm does in trying to project the seasons is using the top 10 feet of the water column and meteorology and water engineering reports, we can guesstimate within a few degrees. So we were guesstimating that the water temps at Lake Fork are 78. Now, as you know, in deeper parts of the lake or down near the dam, they'll be a little cooler, and in real shallow pockets, they might be a little warmer, but that's kind of a good ballpark.
So no navionics layer available.
Your mapping is more detailed. It'd be kind of cool if that could be super updated, but I think maybe a combination of taking that and looking at what we're projecting would be a great fit.
Yeah, definitely. And so no navionics available on the web, and we're using a web viewer here to run this to run this webcast. But
Mhm.
the Navionics layer is available in the app, so anybody can check that out. I did pull up this regional view, and I'm wondering if you're hearing of any of these other area water bodies like Lake Winnsboro, it looks like. That one appears to be a little bit smaller and heating up a little faster. And so probably in that full summer pattern. But are you familiar with any of these other Sandilands, some of these other, are those
Oh
close to
yeah.
you?
Oh yeah. Very familiar with them.
Yeah, we're seeing some pretty good reports, some decent looking bass. Um,
And I think, Matt, you're going
if
to see
I
a lot in the upcoming week, because great news for every angler this weekend between a warming pattern and new moon. My gosh, if call in all your honeydews. If you're locked down with family, try to sneak out. I mean, that's an angler's dream, a new moon and warming trend. And, the fish finally getting out of that post-spawn funk and into an active summer feeding pattern. I think there could be a lot of great topwater action this coming weekend.
Well, to that end, if you're looking for a lunker, another lake that you're familiar with is this O.H. Ivie here. And I did pull that one up. It does look like that one's heated up a little faster. What are the weather patterns looking like out in West Texas as compared to Northeast Dallas?
Yeah, definitely hotter. Also, West Texas, is much drier, so you get much more of a UV penetration, much more sunlight on the water, which will warm it
Mhm.
quicker.
And looks like it's 97 degrees right now. So they're getting really hot. Is it that hot in
Yeah,
Dallas?
not that hot, but it's in the mid 80s here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing some of these creek arms that are almost 80 degrees, and this is as of May 11th. So assuming they've had some hot weather, this could be 8 or 10 degrees warmer since then. And it's a good opportunity to use this weather and water temperature tool to try and forecast what you should expect before you get out there. One of the things I wanted to dig into some of these fishing reports because we do rank these based on the current season. So we're seeing a lot of summer. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I actually see a post-spawn pattern, which you say some of the fish in like Lake Fork, as an example, are probably still in post-spawn transitioning to summer. But look at the pig from this report. I guess that's what we'd expect from OHIV with all the
Wow.
news they've had from that lake.
I mean, looking at that fish, Matt, just from knowing a lot about Ivie, because we have, God, I know probably 3 of the top 5 guides there personally, and talk to them fairly regularly. My guess would be that fish was in a post spawn area, but was well beyond post spawn. That a fish that size probably is an early spawner, probably spawned in February already, and was just up there feeding, maybe raiding bluegill nests. Who knows? Because I saw you scroll past it real quick, but I noticed the comment was a submerged bush.
Yeah.
I think was I
Let me
right
pull
on
that
that?
up. Let's see. Flooded bush,
Yeah,
brush.
yeah. There we go. Yep.
Yeah, looks like they've got quite a mix, almost junk fishing here, but they've got it in as a bladed jig, and the appears that the
Did
Z-Man
it give a time of
jackhammer
day
was
when he
the.
when he caught that?
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say exact time of day, but that's a good transition. So we've run through a few things here. There's a lot of other areas. If OH is your area, I think that's probably going to be your focus. If I go back over to the Dallas area, I can start pulling baits. Really, what Omni is all about, starting to pull hot baits and think about what are people reporting right now and in what patterns. You're seeing most of these are summer. I do have the ability to go back to spring and start looking at some of these pre-spawn, definitely post-spawn opportunities in some of these. But I think this is a good opportunity to make a transition. Let's start thinking about peak feeding times. If somebody's going out this weekend, so we're talking what, May 24th, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pull up the Bass Forecast app and let's see what you're forecasting from a weather perspective for those peak and most active feeding times. Like you said, we got to get the honeydew list done, get an opportunity to get all the water, and let's find the day that's probably the best one to get out there. All right, so Mike, you've got the Bass Forecast app. Let's get a sense of peak feeding time. Let's really try to dial in these lakes. And so we can pull up the towns within the areas of both Lake Fork and O.H. Ivie. And let's see maybe what the app is going to recommend based on really fine tuning to the day.
Sure. Let me start with O.H. Ivie. So several towns around the lake. I pulled up Paint Rock. The reason we go with town rather than lake is some lakes, as you can imagine, like Lake Erie, are so huge, the weather's going to differ on one side to the other. So nearest town or zip code is a very accurate way to really take a look at how's the weather going to affect that portion of the lake. So these dates up top, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th is the feeding activity rating. You can see it's very rare, Matt, to get a perfect 10. A 10 means all the conditions are right, that you would expect bass to react to. It's trending toward their thermal optimum, which the thermal optimum for a largemouth bass is 81-degree water temp. That's when they're feeding the most active. Number two, the right wind speed and the moon phase. Everything, and barometer, everything's falling into line. So like, this is the day you need to get out there. If you need to pay off your wife and kids, you need to do that, right? You need to get out this day, Monday to Monday.
Well, you did a quick scroll there, but it looks like Monday hits a 10, but I saw 10s like 4 days in a row. So it sounds like you
That
should take
is
all of next week off.
amazing.
And
That is amazing. You know, again, I've been doing this for 7 years and we have 500,000 users. So just like you got you got hundreds of thousands, just like we do. I mean, you look at data all the time. I could tell you that this is like 1 out of 1,000 times that this happens. It's pretty rare. It's also
I'm just
saying a
thinking of how
summer
long it's going
pattern.
to take me. I'm thinking about how long it's going to take me to drive to O.H. Ivie from here.
Yeah, summer patterns,
No.
same type of baits, but what I like about your app is it drills down more specifically. And then it gives you the reasons, you know, it's a summer pattern. Oh, a very rapidly falling barometer on that day, which is awesome, as you know. That or stable. So when you look at peak feeding times, right, the 24-hour clock and spot on sonar just refers to it's adjusted to the exact GPS, which is kind of cool because time zones, Matt, can be 1,000 miles wide. So even though Birmingham, Alabama, the headquarter of bass, right, and Dallas are in the same time zone, the peak feeding time windows can be an hour different between the two.
Sure.
So that's why print tables are not very accurate. So you can see the major times. Let me go to Monday. If you're going to fish Memorial Day, because it's a new moon, you're going to find the major time being between noon, 12:10 p.m. and 2 p.m. And again, at sunrise and sunset are minors. Now, they're shorter, but they can be a little bit more intense. In fact, if you're looking for a giant, Butch Brown, you know, the GOAT, he's caught 1,500 bass over 10 pounds. He, in a podcast earlier this year, he said, I catch 90% of my teeners in a minor. That is, I caught my personal best in a minor, my 10-pounder in a minor. So
Can you explain a
really
minor
pay
a little bit?
attention to those minors, and look at the beauty of new moon too. The minors overlap with sunrise and sunset. So for an angler, this is a great quick reference of when is the moon rising, when is the sun rising, when is the moon setting, when is the sun setting, and what are the majors and minors. And you know, even people that look at this as sort of the horoscopes, well, it's a little bit hocus pocus. They'll tell you, well, I don't want to be eating lunch during these times. I want to be on my best spots. And some of the most intelligent researchers and PhDs, like Butch Brown and the Bass professor Doug Hannon, right? He even left his job to focus on sonar study and wrote a book about it. So giants are different, right? If you got to catch bass, you can catch them anytime. But if you're looking for giants, fish on these peak feeding times for sure.
And O.H. Ivie definitely has giants, so
Oh my God.
this is something to be paying attention to.
The
I
state
really
has
like
done a
drilling in
great
here.
job managing the genetics in that lake, Matt. Really.
Yeah.
That's
Why don't we pull
aggressive
up?
management.
Why don't we
Okay, let
pull
me go to Lake
up
Fork.
Fork and see the difference, because that, you know, they're not too far away. How many miles do you think are between
They're
Fork and
actually,
Ivie?
oh gosh, Texas is a big state, Matt. Their driving distance, if you're going like driving like I like to drive 85, 90 miles an hour, it's 2.5 hours to get to Ivie and 2 hours to get to Fork. So they're almost 5 hours apart.
So
And
we
the
shouldn't expect to see difference.
weather pattern's quite a bit different. West Texas is more extreme. So in the summer, it's going to be hotter than here. And in the winter, it's going to be colder than here. And it also gets a lot less water, you know,
Got it.
as you get closer to Louisiana, which is where Lake Fork is, halfway between here and Louisiana, you're going to get, let me go to Lake Fork, which the nearest town there is Emory. And I just had it in here. Here it is. Yeah, look at the ratings are lower today, right?
Not as
And
good.
they spike up, but they don't reach a perfect 10, and then they drop back down. So the weather pattern there is not as consistent. Not saying it's bad, it's still very good, and an 8.4 is still very, very high.
Now, if you've got limited time to fish, sometimes it's hard to use these tools to say, this is the time I'm going to be out in the water at that peak feeding peak feeding time. But when I'm seeing this, I'm looking at going, if I'm choosing between 2, 4, 5 lakes, and I'm using Omnia to determine what lake I want to go to, I'm definitely looking at Bass Forecast to tell me maybe I'm going in the West Texas range, hitting O.H. Ivie. because it looks like I've got a better opportunity to really land a large fish.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's a decision like Dallas Fort Worth, the decision a lot of anglers are making is, do I go east or west?
Yeah,
Because I'm going to drive 2 hours either way.
yeah,
So
that's excellent.
notice too, I didn't stop in really general bait categories. Notice how the baits are a little bit different out here because it's going to be a little slower. So you're seeing more of a plastic worm creature, soft jerk bait. Now, again, I think where Omnia can really help anglers dial in is in West Texas. People tend to use more browns and light tan tones, and in East Texas, any color works as long as it's green. So I think the specifics of what baits, your ambassadors do a great job of that. But if we go to the Monday, at Lake Fork, look at that, Matt. It's 5.6, which is not a bad rating, but it's nowhere near 10, right?
Right.
And the reason is, okay, very light winds may make the fish spooky. You see that right here on the rating explained?
Yeah.
But that's a good indicator too as to what kind of baits you might need, I can tell you, I fished a lake out in East Texas the other last weekend. It was a private ranch, but the ranch owner told me, Mike, when the wind's dead calm, good luck getting a bite. And as soon as the wind speed comes up, you're going to hammer them. And that's exactly what happened. The wind was dead till like 11 a.m. 11 a.m. we got a little ripple on the water and caught like 3 in the next half hour. And we didn't get any in the previous couple hours.
Well, this was Monday. It was suggesting not so great. Let's pull up the Omnia app and we'll pull up some of that wind speed and run the forecast, and let's see exactly what that looks like over lake on Lake Fork. All right, Mike. So we're back on the Lake Fork area with Lake Fork in the center here, and I'm actually going to pull up one of the wind speed layers and just show the animations of what that looks like in the area here. And because you'd mentioned, and actually when we were looking at the app, we're seeing that the minor and major times for peak feeding conditions were actually a little bit different for we're a little bit different for Fork and Ivie, and that's because, like you said, they're almost 5 hours different. So you really have to refine down to the location. Looks like there's barely any wind moving. It looks like it's pretty calm out there. And so if I do a 3-day forecast and try to get into that, we'll get it close. We'll try and load that up for Sunday. And it looks like it's continuing to just be extremely slow. So if that air temp gets really hot, you're going to be sitting in some pretty steady air, which looks like it's coming out of the south and it's not moving very quickly. Not moving too much. Let's move over to Ivie and see if that's the same case here. It's like a bit more wind there.
And Matt, that's the key difference. It's a big difference, especially if you're hunting shallow fish that are. This is a great time of the year to hit big bass that are raiding bluegill nests and shad spawn.
So would you actually suggest on Ivie, if somebody chooses from the app base, like the Bass Forecast app can essentially tell them you should probably go to Ivie, that's where you stand your best chance to catch big fish. Would you actually suggest to them that they should try to get into the areas where the surface area is most disrupted and not go into the protected bays, where a lot of us, we try to seek shelter, right? We try to use that Omnia app to determine where the wind's coming from, and I'll sit in here and be protected. But you're actually suggesting be in the arms that are most affected by the wind?
Absolutely. Look, it depends on how heavy the wind and what kind of boat you have too. You don't want to be in 20-mile-an-hour winds on O.H. Ivie in a 12-foot John boat, right? It's dangerous. But if you can find if I had a 12-foot John boat, I'd probably go in that first little creek arm and try to find a little wind. If I had a big bass boat, then your options are a lot greater, right? You can go to some of those windier points. I don't know if you ever read Josh Alwine's book. He studied 40,000 bass catches and did a bunch of correlations. The number one factor, aside from temperature trend, was fishing pressure. On a weekday, the catch rate was 3 times higher than on a weekend at a public lake. The second factor, Matt, was wind speed. The higher the wind, the higher the catch rate. Bass get more aggressive. I mean, think about it. From babies on, they were used to being predated upon by birds. So even a 10-pound bass, hey, she got to be 10 pounds by avoiding predation. So bass are very spooky when the water's calm. Now, if you're great at fishing deep and using your electronics, that's a different deal. Then you can still get a pretty good bite on a dead calm day. But a lot of these fish are going to be shallow, and they're going to be way more aggressive at sunrise, sunset, when the wind's up.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Looks like it's pretty calm all over the place. There's not a lot of wind, but that subtle difference between Lake Fork and O.H. Ivie might make enough of a difference to really be the lake that you should check out. Well, are you going to get out this weekend?
Unfortunately, not. Wife and I are heading out on our longest vacation ever. So, but all my buddies have been calling me, "Hey, man, you want to go fishing Saturday, Sunday? I saw the bass forecast rating."
Well, we'll
Yeah,
do this again as soon as
I
we
guess
can
the
come
one
back.
big tip I'd have for anglers this weekend, and it's something I learned from going out with guides at Fork, is the big. We didn't catch much all day. This was a mid to late May, similar time period we are now, several years ago. And he goes, "These bass are raiding bluegill nests right at sunset." And so I was getting discouraged because we weren't catching much. And we put on green pumpkin jigs with twin tail trailer, and he hit a bank, and you could see all the bluegill beds. And the sun was just starting to set. A bass's eyes take in more light than a brim. So when the sun starts to set, and this time of year, they go on the attack. And we just started pitching jigs to these bluegill beds and just hopping them real quick, and bam, bam, bam. I think we caught 3 bass all day up to that point, and in the last hour of sunlight, we caught 30 between 3 and 8 pounds. It was unreal. It's like the bass moved up in waves to ambush bluegill beds at sunset. So for what it's
So
worth,
use those patterns to your advantage to be successful out there.
yeah. In the evening and in the morning, the shad spawn. So if you got a lake that has both, great. Be there at first light to hit the shad spawn, and then be there at last light to hit the bluegill bed, and take you a nap or go get a lunch and smoke a cigar or do whatever you're going to do in the middle of the day.
All right, I love it. And check the Bass Forecast app to know when you need to optimize that time. So I appreciate you coming on with me. Have a good vacation. Let's jump on another one of these once we can validate some of these details. And I appreciate you coming on. That's another Omnia report.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
See you, Mike.